Welcome back to Ornn's Kitchen. I'm your host, Crazed Porcupine. This week we'll be exploring a few different creators. Our appetizers this week feature a nice variety of decks from a wide selection of creators this week, featuring Marshall, Sunny, Mogwai, and a new creator to the series, Malagos. First up, we'll cover Sunny's Wildfire deck. This deck is a Wildfire Printer deck designed entirely around getting Wildfire down to as low as mana as possible, and creating as many copies in the deck to be found through all the updraft effects and predict effects to ensure you draw enough Wildfire to finish off your opponent after getting in as much chip damage as possible. Majin Pei has updated the deck slightly to be slightly more competitive, so if you're looking for a more streamlined version of the deck, go with this. But if you're just looking to have some fun with a meme deck, Sunny's unedited version is the way to go. Next up is Marshall. While he doesn't pop up in the creative spotlight nearly as much, he has started a cool series where he takes champions that are not currently in the meta, builds decks for them, and then takes them to gauntlets and ladder. This time, we're going to focus on just one of those decks. We're going over the Nami Samira deck that is featured in episode 2 of the series. While this deck has previously played Fizz in place of Nami for easy elusive ability to reliably trigger Plunder, and to keep a unit alive at almost any point in the game, Nami provides some extra punch to your few elusive units, and helps Samira to be able to challenge any unit from the buffs from Nami. Overall, a strong deck which is still a potent option. Third, we've got Mogwai's deck. This deck we're focusing on this week is a Pantheon Morgana deck that utilizes PNZ as the second region. This deck utilizes Shady Spectacles and Scavenged Camo Cloaker to make your faded units just absolutely giant that can eventually punch face with the elusive keyword. Overall, this is probably the spiciest deck out of this week's appetizer options. Finally, our newest spotlight is Malagos. He's brought us a PNZ Shadow Isles champion list deck that's built entirely on printing as many copies of Vengeance as possible to kill as many units to keep your opponent from being able to do any damage to you. The deck eventually wins by using Chemtech Drakes to either beat down or burning the opponent whenever you cast spells. This deck is very potent and very frustrating for your opponents to play against. It definitely has potential to show up as a more powerful deck should it pick up steam and popularity. Now, that's all for our appetizers this week. Our flavors of the week are remaining quite popular, as the inability for the meta to find ways to force the Elder Dragon Galio Morgana deck to drop win weight means that at this point, we'll probably see significant nerfs to either the Elder Dragon Origin or the formidable units. While still number one, the play rate is still absolutely off the charts. Elder Dragon Formidable Demacia is still the best deck in the game. While the win rate has dropped slightly over the last few weeks, we've still got a dominant deck that's overwhelming the meta, and people can't figure out what decks are consistent winners into the list. While a variety of decks have popped up to try and prey on the deck, it remains incredibly resilient and able to fend off almost any threat to it. Number 2 is also still Morgana Mordekaiser, which shows that it is also an incredibly resilient deck. While not the same sort of powerhouse as the Elder Dragon Demacia lists, this will also likely mean that the prevalence of the list will result in a nerf to Mageseeker Inquisitor or Mordekaiser. Overall, still a perfect choice for climbing. Third place deck also remains unchanged in Elder Dragon Shadow Isles. This last list is just a fun deck that manages to have a decent matchup into just about everything without being too overbearing for opponents. It also remains to be an engaging and fun deck to play. Fourth place is actually a new deck that's broken into the top 5. Lurk is an archetype that's been around for quite a while, almost since it released back in Rising Tides. But it usually trends down as time goes on and archetypes become established, but it usually pops up again every so often to prey on decks and archetypes that struggle to sustain enough of a board presence to effectively block its units and preserve their own health. Overall, this is a pretty established list and archetype that always seems to be a good deck to have in reserves. Just be aware of the difficulty of the deck winning when it doesn't start with the attack token. Fifth place is Annie Jin, also an established archetype. It's a great control type option that has a great aggressive curve. Again, excellent option to have in reserves. And, well, that's everything for our flavor of the week. We've got our chef's specials. First up is Lysandra Annie, a Freljord Noxus control deck that's focused on burning out your opponents with various elemental spells to reduce Clash of the Titans down to 6 mana to cheat out Titanic units. Most Titanic units being 8 mana or higher tends to result in an almost instantly leveled up Lysandra. And with enough Titanic units, or even that are 8 cost or higher with Clash of the Titans, you can get the Watcher down for free from Lysandra's level up. This is overall pretty weak deck, but has potential for some crazy high rolls on the Titanic units it summons, which can result in wins that just aren't really deserved. Second, we've got Gwen Elder Dragon. This is pretty much a pure Hallowed deck with Shadow Isle's best cards to help control the board. This deck should be able to level up Elder Dragon pretty easily, and has enough regional units to trigger Elder Dragon boons to be able to cast Elder Dragon. Overall, a very aggressive deck that is meant to be able to just push through plenty of damage from Hallowed Overwhelm units or the Gwen Squill. That's everything for this week. Overall, a much shorter episode than usual, but hopefully next week we'll have a little bit more to discuss, and we'll do some theory crafting with what sort of decks will be impacted by the nerfs coming that week, or what decks might be possible, considering what buffs might come to certain cards. So, we'll see you next week, and have a wonderful day.